One of the two colonist ships sent to colonize the Halcyon system, UDL-002, the Hope, or the Hope for short, was delayed in its mission to reach and colonize the Halcyon system, not arriving until decades after the groundbreaker. By this point, it had already been decided and believed widely that the Hope had been lost, along with all of the colonists aboard, and would not be arriving in the system at all. The Hope left Earth for Halcyon in the year 2285, with William Hunt as its captain. Aboard this vessel there are hundreds of thousands of colonists in stasis, ready to start a new society in the Halcyon system after approximately 10 years of travel time, with a small crew of 24 people staying awake in order to operate and maintain the ship's systems, and when the time came to awake the colonists from their stasis to start their new life in Halcyon. However, things did not go as had been planned when 9 years into the journey via skip space, which is a method of faster than light travel, the Hope's skip drive suffered a major malfunction which rendered it completely incapable of performing this faster than light travel. Unfortunately, the crew were unable to repair the skip drive, meaning that the remaining distance to the Halcyon system would have to be completed using the sublight engines, extending the remaining travel time from 1 year to 26. Understandably, the crew would have panicked over this news, as due to the original plan, there was only 1 year worth of rations left for the crew to consume, which set in the fear of inevitably starving to death, causing tensions to build between crewmates. Because of this, Donna Hunt, who was the wife of the captain, attempted to grow tomatoes for the crew to eat, but was unsuccessful in her attempts, causing more dismay. At the same point in time as Donna was attempting this method of growing food, another crew member, Frank Nolder, who was the chief engineer of the ship, went straight to the extreme and started to bring colonists out of stasis in order to cannibalize them without the knowledge of the other crew members. Eventually, Frank came clean to the Hope's captain about what he had been doing in order to eat, and tried to suggest that this is how the rest of the crew could survive as well. However, the captain was understandably not supportive of this idea, and instead decided to lock Frank in the ship's brig to serve for his crimes. Without his knowing, however, other colonists had begun to conspire with Frank's plan to cannibalize the colonists behind the captain's back, with one of the early supporters of this idea being Alexei Volkov. He also tried to convince the captain that this is how they could survive the 26-year trip. However, after the crew did the math and calculated rations, they came to the conclusion that they would need to eat tens of thousands of colonists in order to survive for such an extended period of time, which was just a ridiculous exorbitant amount. With starvation still a looming threat, the crew became even more restless and brash, with tensions rising. One of Frank's supporters eventually freed him from the ship's brig, and he eventually offered small pieces of human flesh to other members of the crew, including Donna, who, desperate for food, took it and ate it. However, this didn't sit right with her moral compass, and she decided that if she had to face starvation or cannibalizing the colonists of a new world, she would much rather sacrifice herself by taking her own life. With both the authority of the captain now meaning nothing and the first mate of the ship dead, this led to a mutiny forming aboard the Hope. Aware of this formation, Captain Hunt locked down parts of the ship in order to prevent any further damage to the colonists that were supposed to begin the new society in Halcyon. Hunt sealed himself and the ship's navigator, Rezi Tariga, in the ship's bridge. As well as this, Hunt sought to lock access to the hibernation storage bays, but not before another crew member, Thurston Stallworth, put himself into hibernation alongside the other colonists, with the theory that if the ship ever did reach Halcyon, he would be woken upon arrival. I don't know why other crew members didn't do this, but anyway. So for now, both the ship's bridge and hibernation base storage rooms were sealed, with the rebellious and starving crew left to die out in the halls of the ship. However, it didn't take long for this to turn, as the crew found equipment that they could utilise in order to drill open the door to the hibernation storage, which could be heard from the bridge. When the sound of drilling subsided, Hunt feared that Frank and his crew had gained access to the colonists and left the safety of the bridge to confront him. Pretty much any information after this point is lost, but what we do know is that Tariga, the navigator, eventually succumbed to starvation. However, what happened between Hunt and Frank during their final confrontation is completely unknown. It is theorised that Hunt killed Frank and the remaining cannibals and eventually succumbed to starvation himself, but with no one left alive to recount this story, we don't truly know what happened in the final moments of the crew's demise. The Hope eventually reached the Halcyon system in the year 2320, which is 25 years later than they had originally planned for. By this time, a colony had already been established within the system, and when the Hope was found adrift in the system by the Halcyon Holdings corporate board, they decided to hide the ship in the orbit of the planet Typhon, where they could abandon and forget about the vessel and its cargo. The board did this due to the fact that they believed that since the colonists had been in stasis for so long, 25 years longer than anticipated, it would be too dangerous to safely revive them, and as such they hid the ship out of fear that if the people of Halcyon found out about this misfortune, there would be a public outcry to try and help the colonists. During this time, Phineas Wells, who was a scientist working for the board, discovered the truth of what happened to the Hope and grew frustrated that nothing was being done about it. Initially, Phineas sought permission from his superiors to begin research and experiments of how the colonists could be safely revived, but they denied him of this mission. Instead, still set on saving the colonists, Phineas went behind the back of his superiors and began researching on his own. He would take colonists from the ship, removing them from stasis and returning them to his lab in order to experiment on. Eventually, the board discovered Phineas's activities and put the names murderer and criminal on his head. However, despite this minor setback, Phineas continued to experiment on the colonists while also evading the authorities in the process. After 35 long years of research and experimentation, Phineas was able to perfect a chemical formula that was capable of preventing colonists removed from stasis from suffering explosive cell death due to their extended time spent in said stasis. Unfortunately, Phineas only had enough resources to make a single trial batch of this formula, in which he uses on the Stranger, who he then asks to help retrieve more resources to make more of this formula, due to the fact that he cannot, because of the bounty that has been placed on his head by the board. The fate of the Hope and the colonists aboard from this point on is entirely in the hands of the Stranger and what path they wish to pursue. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like, subscribe and hit that bell notification icon if you never want to miss another upload from Project Archivist. If you want to support the channel, then you can do so by becoming a channel member through the join button on the channel homepage. You can also support Project Archivist on Patreon, where you can join a tier and earn constant rewards for your support. You can find links to both of these in the description. And with that, that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.